Granny's house was the definition of boring. At least that's what I, Zack, a totally normal 14-year-old, thought. Every weekend, my parents shipped me off to her place. They called it quality time. I called it torture. Don't get me wrong, Granny made killer cookies, but she also made me play Scrabble. Scrabble. Who even plays Scrabble anymore? It was like she was stuck in the Stone Age or something. While my friends were out skateboarding or playing video games, I was stuck inside. I was surrounded by doilies and the smell of mothballs. Granny always sent me to bed early, too.
Early to bed, early to rise.
She'd say, yeah, right. More like early to bed, early to die, of boredom. This weekend was no different. I was trapped in Granny's world of knitting needles and Lawrence Welk reruns. Little did I know, my world was about to be rocked. Literally. It was Saturday night, and Granny had just shooed me upstairs to bed. She had that familiar twinkle in her eye, the one that always made me wonder if she was up to something. "Get some sleep, dearie," she said in her soothing voice. "You look tired." She patted my head gently, her touch warm and comforting. Tired? I was bored out of my mind. The kind of boredom that makes you count the cracks in the ceiling and wonder if time has actually stopped. But I knew better than to argue with Granny. She had a way of making you feel like you were 5 years old again, no matter how old you actually were. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I heard a strange noise. It was faint at first, almost like a whisper, but then it grew louder. It was a rhythmic thumping coming from downstairs. Thump, 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 thump. The sound was so peculiar, it made my heart race. What in the world was Granny up to at this hour? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more bizarre than the last. Maybe she was doing some kind of weird old people exercise routine. I imagined her in leg warmers and a headband doing aerobics to some oldies music. Or maybe she was building a time machine to take her back to the 1950s. Granny always did have a fascination with that era. My curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't just lie there and wonder. I had to find out what was going on. I snuck out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt like an eternity. Peeking down, I saw something that made my jaw drop. It was like a scene from a movie, one that you couldn't believe was happening in real life. The front door was open and a dark figure was sneaking out. It was Granny. My sweet, gentle Granny sneaking out like a teenager past curfew. But she wasn't wearing her usual housecoat and slippers. No, she was dressed in all black, like a character from a spy movie. She was carrying something long and thin in a case. It looked like a musical instrument, but why would she need that in the middle of the night? Where was she going at this hour? The question buzzed in my mind like an annoying fly. And what was she hiding? The more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. This was way too much excitement for one Saturday night. My mind was racing with possibilities, each one more thrilling than the last. I decided to follow her. I had to know what she was up to. I tiptoed down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. I slipped out the door and hid behind the bushes, watching as Granny made her way down the street. She moved with surprising agility for someone her age. She headed towards an old, abandoned building at the end of the street. What could she possibly be doing there? I followed her, my heart pounding in my chest. The building was dark and eerie, the perfect setting for a mystery. I peeked through a crack in the door and saw Granny setting up what looked like a drum set. She picked up the drumsticks and started playing, her movements fluid and confident. I couldn't believe my eyes. Granny was a drummer, and not just any drummer, she was amazing. The beats she played were complex and mesmerizing. Soon, other elderly people joined her, each with their own instrument. They started playing together, creating a beautiful symphony of sound. I watched in awe as they played, realizing that Granny had a whole secret life I knew nothing about. I snuck back home, my mind buzzing with excitement. I couldn't wait to talk to Granny about her secret band. As I lay in bed, I couldn't help but smile. This was definitely the most exciting Saturday night I'd ever had. The next morning, Granny and I shared a knowing smile over breakfast. I had a feeling this was just the beginning of many more adventures to come. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was as if the world had turned upside down in an instant. Granny, the queen of Scrabble and early bedtimes, the epitome of a quiet, predictable life, was sneaking out in the middle of the night. The very idea seemed preposterous, yet there she was, moving with a stealth that belied her age. I had to get to the bottom of this. There was no way I could just let it go. My curiosity was piqued, and I felt a strange mix of concern and excitement. As quietly as I could, I tiptoed down the stairs and out the front door. Each step felt like an eternity, my heart pounding louder with every creak of the wooden steps. But Granny was gone. She had vanished into the night, leaving no trace behind. The street was eerily silent, the only sound the distant hum of a street lamp. I was about to give up and go back inside when I noticed something strange. A glimmer of light caught my eye, drawing my attention to the basement door. The basement door, usually locked tighter than Fort Knox, was slightly ajar. This was highly unusual. Granny never left it open, not even a crack. A shiver ran down my spine. What if Granny was in trouble? My mind raced with possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. What if she had been kidnapped by a gang of rogue bingo players? The thought was absurd, but in that moment, anything seemed possible. Okay, maybe not. But still, something was definitely up. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I took a deep breath and pushed the basement door open. The hinges creaked ominously, adding to the sense of foreboding. The basement stairs were dark and creepy, like something out of a horror movie. Each step seemed to echo in the silence, amplifying my anxiety. I flipped the light switch, but the bulb just flickered and died. The darkness seemed to close in around me, making it hard to breathe. Great, just great. Now I was trapped in a dark basement with who knows what lurking in the shadows. My frustration was mounting, but I couldn't turn back now. I slowly made my way down the steps, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, the darkness swallowing me whole. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I could make out some shapes in the darkness. Shadows danced on the walls, creating eerie, shifting forms. There was an old sofa, a dusty workbench, and wait a minute. Something didn't add up. This wasn't just a storage space. What was that? In the far corner of the basement, surrounded by stacks of old boxes and furniture, was a drum set. It looked out of place, almost surreal in the dim light. Not just any drum set either. This thing was huge. It had an array of drums and cymbals, more than I had ever seen in one place. It had more drums and cymbals than I could count. The setup was impressive, almost professional. Who could it belong to? And next to it, propped up against the wall, was a sleek black guitar. It gleamed in the faint light, looking well-maintained and ready to play. This couldn't be Granny's stuff, could it? The thought was almost laughable, yet here it was, undeniable evidence of a hidden life. What other secrets was Granny hiding? My mind raced with questions, each more intriguing than the last. I knew I had to find out more, to uncover the truth behind this basement revelation. Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, I decided to investigate further. There had to be more clues hidden in the shadows, more pieces to this puzzling story. I began searching through the old boxes, hoping to find something that would explain the presence of the musical equipment. Each box was filled with memories, old photographs, and trinkets from the past. Then I found it, an old photo album tucked away in a dusty corner. As I opened it, the pages revealed a side of Granny I had never known. There she was, a young woman, vibrant and full of life, playing the drums in what looked like a band. The photos were old, but the passion in her eyes was unmistakable. I was amazed. Granny had been a drummer, a musician with a hidden past. The revelation was both shocking and exhilarating. It felt like I was discovering a whole new person. As I closed the photo album, I couldn't help but smile. Granny's secret life was a testament to the fact that people are full of surprises, no matter how well you think you know them. This basement revelation had opened my eyes to the incredible stories that lie hidden in the most unexpected places. With a newfound respect for Granny and a heart full of curiosity, I made my way back up the basement stairs. I knew this was just the beginning of a fascinating journey into the past, one that I was eager to explore further. As I closed the basement door behind me, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Granny might be hiding. One thing was certain, life was about to get a lot more interesting. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but it was just Granny. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, her face a mixture of shock and amusement. I crept closer, drawn in by the gleaming instruments. As I reached out to touch the guitar, I heard a noise behind me. It was like discovering a secret room in an old house, a room filled with mysteries and possibilities. My mind was racing. Why did Granny have a drum set in her basement? And a guitar?
Zack, what are you doing down here? She asked, her voice surprisingly steady.
I stammered. I heard a noise and I thought you might be in trouble. Smooth, Zack, real smooth.
Granny chuckled. Trouble? No, dearie, I'm not in trouble. Just indulging in a little hobby of mine.
A hobby? I squeaked, my voice cracking. You mean you play the drums?
Granny smiled, her eyes twinkling. Not just the drums, Zack. I play in a band.
A band? My Granny? This was too much. My whole world was being turned upside down. A band? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. The word felt strange on my tongue, especially in the context of Granny's house. It was as if the word itself was a foreign object in Granny's house. The living room with its lace doilies and antique furniture seemed worlds away from the loud, rebellious spirit of rock and roll. Granny, with her tea cozies and her love of reruns, in a band? The idea was almost laughable. I had always seen her as the epitome of old-fashioned charm, someone who found joy in the simple pleasures of life. The thought was ludicrous, impossible even. How could someone so rooted in tradition have a secret life that was so unconventional? Yet here I was, standing in her basement, surrounded by musical instruments. Guitars, drums, and even a keyboard were scattered around, each one telling a story I had never heard.
Granny chuckled. "Surprised, are you?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with a mischievous light I had never seen before. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, to reveal a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. "Don't tell your parents. They think I spend my evenings playing bingo." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, adding an air of mystery to the whole situation.
Bingo? Now that was a scary thought. The idea of Granny sitting in a stuffy hall, marking off numbers on a card, seemed almost as absurd as her being in a band. But why? I stammered. Why all the secrecy? My mind was racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Why had she never told anyone?
Granny's smile faded slightly. "It's a long story, Zack," she said. Her voice was tinged with a hint of sadness, as if the memories were both cherished and painful. "Let's just say that your great-grandparents weren't exactly fans of rock and roll. They were strict, conservative, and believed in a very different set of values. They thought it was the devil's music. To them, rock and roll represented everything that was wrong with the world. It was loud, rebellious, and completely at odds with their way of life." She shook her head as if clearing away the memory. It was clear that this was a part of her past she didn't revisit often. "Anyway, enough about that. What do you say I show you a thing or two about playing the drums?" Her face lit up again, the sadness replaced by excitement.
And just like that, my life changed. My weekends at Granny's house were no longer about Scrabble and boredom. They became an adventure, a journey into a world I had never imagined. They were about the power of music, the thrill of a drum solo, and the bond between a grandson and his rock star Granny. Each beat of the drum was a revelation, a connection to a side of Granny I had never known. Who knew Granny had such a cool side? Her collection of rock memorabilia, from old concert tickets to vintage records, was a testament to a life lived with passion and defiance. We spent hours in that basement, playing music, laughing, and sharing stories. It was our little secret, a bond that grew stronger with each passing weekend. She showed me old photos of her band, told me stories of their gigs, and even taught me some of their songs. It was like stepping into a time machine, seeing Granny as a young, vibrant woman with dreams and aspirations. Those weekends changed me. They taught me that people are never just one thing, that they have layers and stories that we might never know unless we take the time to listen. And most importantly, they taught me that it's never too late to follow your passion. Granny's story was a reminder that age is just a number, and that the spirit of rock and roll can live on in anyone, no matter how old they are. As we walked out of the basement, instruments in hand, I felt a sense of pride and admiration for Granny that I had never felt before. She was more than just my grandmother. She was a rock star, a rebel, and my hero. Who knew that a simple visit to Granny's house would turn into one of the most unforgettable experiences of my life? As we waved goodbye, I knew that our secret would stay just that, a special bond between a grandson and his rock and roll Granny.